Hi, welcome to DrSecrets.com. I'm DR, and today we're going to talk about GERD, or Gastroesophageal Reflux Disease. To understand this condition, the first thing you need to do is take a little look at the anatomy of your stomach. So as we talked about in heartburn, you have your mouth up here, you have a conduit into the stomach processing area, which is called the esophagus or swallow pipe. So you swallow your food, passes down the swallow pipe, comes into the stomach. Now, when it falls into this vat of acid for digesting proteins, the stomach has a lot of protective mechanisms that stop it from being burnt by the same acid that it's secreting. So it has a lot of defenses built into its cellular structure. Now, one of those defenses, the esophagus does not have the same lining as the stomach, so it can't have acid exposed to it chronically without causing esophagitis or inflammation. So one of the things that the stomach has is at its junction with the swallow pipe, it has a valve, or basically a fold in the stomach lining, and that helps to create this path as a one-way street that only allows food in and no food and acid back up. So that's your food bolus there being digested. Now, the other mechanism that's used to protect this integrity of this system is that on both sides of the stomach there's a thick band of muscle called the diaphragm. Now, if you imagine that this is your stomach here, and then you have the diaphragm wrapped around it, the diaphragm forms almost like a noose around the neck of the stomach. So that pressure from that thick muscle around it acts as an additional safeguard, keeping contents of the stomach beneath the level of the esophagus. Now, in gastroesophageal reflux disease, what that basically is describing is that the acid contents of the stomach, rather than staying within the stomach, are allowed to geyser or travel back up into the esophagus. So people that have this condition can actually taste the acid back up in their mouth when it refluxes, or sometimes they may feel burning in their nostrils when they're lying down as the acid is propulsed back up. Two things that tend to cause this is pregnancy and obesity. In both of those conditions, you have a large amount of pressure in the abdomen pushing the stomach up. If it pushes hard enough, eventually it herniates the stomach through the diaphragm muscle and then destroys the integrity of that valve that I was talking about earlier. So if you imagine this as the stomach here, this knuckle underneath the diaphragm, if you keep pushing on it, eventually it herniates up through the diaphragm. And that's called a hiatal hernia. So the problem with a hiatal hernia is that it destroys the integrity of this valvular system. So basically the treatment for reflux disease is very similar to heartburn treatment. One is the dietary measures. So anything that increases acidity is going to make the symptoms worse. So the dietary measures that you're looking at is trying to avoid stuff like coffee, which promotes secretion of acid, black tea, alcohol, citrus, tomatoes, spicy food, and one thing that might surprise you is actually chocolate. The reason for chocolate is that chocolate actually relaxes this valve, so that enhances reflux. Sometimes fatty foods. And a simple rule of thumb is anything that you're eating that burns your mouth is going to burn your stomach too. And if you have reflux, it's going to come back to haunt you when it's ejected back up. So you need to try to stick with a kind of a bland diet. Now, in addition to that, the treatments used for heartburn, like antacids, such as proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers, both these things are basically blocking the ability of the parietal or stomach cells to secrete their acid. Also will work for reflux symptoms as well, because if you cut the amount of acid, then there's less acid to splash back up and burn you. Another thing that sometimes helps is prokinetic agents. How a prokinetic agent works is you take it before a meal, roughly half an hour. And what it does is it stimulates the stomach to empty its contents. So any acid and food that was left undigested, it basically expels it. So that way you're making room for the next set of food that's coming down, so that there's less overall final fluid or liquid volume. So there's less chance then of overflow back up the swallow pipe. So that's another method that's used for reflux control. Now, people that have bad reflux, they'll also find that when they're upright, the reflux isn't as bad as when they lie down. And the reason for that is simply because fluid tends to follow gravity. So when you're erect and you lie down, the acid then is able to bubble back up the esophagus. So one thing that sometimes helps these people is, instead of sleeping on a flat bed, is to raise the bed on triangular blocks. So instead of the bed being flat, then it's kind of angled. So if this is our guy here, the gravity then tries to pull the contents and keep them down in the stomach where they're supposed to be. So weight loss also helps a lot, because there's less pressure against the stomach pushing up. Now, in really severe cases of reflux where none of these methods are working, so you're careful with your diet. Oh, one other thing is smoking also promotes reflux burning as well. And that's simply because the smoke is an irritant to the lining. So you basically have two irritants now. Instead of just smoke, you also have acid too. Right, but back to my story. In really severe cases where you try all your dietary stuff, you stop smoking, you try to lose weight, and you're still having really severe reflux, then sometimes surgery is used to repair the hiatal hernia, basically to push the stomach back down inside and repair this valvular structure. But for most cases, I've seen several people who've needed to be on medication, these PPIs and H2 blockers, for long periods of time, and when they just change their diet and go to a more bland lifestyle, they don't need these medicines anymore, or just need them very infrequently. So that's the basic secrets for gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD.
That's it in a nutshell. Thank you for watching, and stay well.